Hello there. Today is going to be one of our very first, or one of the first of very many conversations talking about the periodic table. All right, periodic table of elements. This glorious chart here is basically a tool of all the different types of atoms that we know of that exist in the universe. Again, the ones that we know of. In fact, even some of the ones down here were ones that we never actually found, and we just ended up making them instead. It's a very complicated process. It basically involves smashing atoms together. But a couple of things that we notice when we first see it, there's obviously numbers, there's letters. We'll explain what each of all of them mean. We notice that it is almost kind of like a grid, but very incomplete grid. The fact that we see rows and we see columns. Right? Difference. One easy way to remember difference of row and a column. Rows, if you're rowing a boat, you go side to side. A column has the letter L in it, and it goes up and down, the letter L. So a column is up and down. All right, but you notice that, in this first row here, there's only two elements, and they're on opposite sides of each other. What's with this big gap here? It's not just for the title. There's a reason why that's there. We even have some down here. Why are these here? Which we'll talk more about as we go forward. All right. So there's a lot of complications about how to read it. All right. And so what I want to spend today focusing really on is how do we start the very basics of how do we read this? We have rows and we have columns, and how do we label them? All right. That's our major goal for today. And if I wanted to say what element is in period 3, group 16, you should be able to tell me what that is, because that's the very basic. And so for this, what we're going to be doing this discussion here in our notes, obviously make sure you have your handy dandy notebooks. If you have your periodic table right now, you might want to have that out as well. If you haven't gotten your periodic table yet, we'll be able to do that still when we're together in class. So we're going to read the very basics of how to read the periodic table today. All right, and we'll add more and more to it. The conversation about the periodic table and reading it is not going to be done all in one day. One thing I always like to say about the periodic table is it is a tool. All right, it's like a calculator in math class. All right, we just get a fancier and fancier calculator the more information we have. It's a tool. You got to learn how to use it. All right, the first time you use a graphing calculator, your teacher had to teach you how to use the graphing functions. All right, that's what we're doing right now. Is I'm teaching you how to use this tool, because I want you to use it to understand atoms and how atoms interact with each other to form compounds into acids and bases, and how they combine together to create toxic gases or create combustible explosive materials. You have to understand the chart that we use as a tool, the calculator, to do the math. All right, and so what we have here is I started off. We're going to start with the very basics, the difference between rows and columns. All right, because that is a lot of the nomenclature, fancy name for naming system, nomenclature of how we describe this. All right, so I have a little silhouette of my periodic table. I recommend you do that in your periodic table right now. I'll wait. You can pause it. Okay, now that you have that set up, I make it nice and big too if you can, because we're going to write kind of all around it, if you will. All right, so we know we have rows and we have columns. All right, let's start with the rows. All right, the rows on our periodic table, we have 7 of them. I know on the video, or if in your periodic table, it looks like there's 2 more at the very bottom. They're actually parts of the 6th and 7th row, which we'll talk more about. All right, there are 7 periods on the periodic table. Easy way to remember that, there are 7 periods in the school day. All right. There are 7 periods, or the rows, on the periodic table. Again, they go left and right. So here are our periods. They go that way. And there should be 7 of them. All right? There should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the bottom row is 7. All right, so we have our 7 different rows on the periodic table. All right, pretty straightforward. All right, we just go through the rows. One mistake people make is there's 2 elements in period 1, And then you got to go all the way across here to number 2. There's 2 elements in there. Why are there 2 elements? Well, once we start to get familiar, being able to read the periodic table, I can explain that. Because if I told you the answer now, yeah, you hear it, but you wouldn't understand it until we learn more about how to read it and why it's constructed the way it is. All right? So, today we're just practicing talking about how to properly read these. All right? So, we have our 7 rows, straightforward. The columns is a little bit trickier. All right? First of all, it goes by one of 2 names. They are either called groups or families. I like to use the word groups. I just want to bring that out there just in case you see it in another place. I think the textbook kind of goes back and forth. All right, these are the ones that go up and down. These are the columns. We have 18 groups. Oops. Again, an easy way to remember which one's column. What is a column? Column has the letter L in it. That letter goes up and down. Rows, think about rowing a boat. You're going side to side as you're rowing. All right. Now there's 18 groups here, so we go all the way across, even down here. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I call this area the valley. Now back up on the hill. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and the highest point all the way on the opposite side, number 18. All right? So we have 7 periods and 18 groups. Now actually we break down those groups. Each group, every element that's in that column is in that column for a very, very specific reason. All right? It is in that group because it shares some similar properties. Whether it's its density or its state of matter or the number of electrons it has and the number of energy levels, there's a very, very specific pattern of which ones go there and how they react with other elements, all right? Which means we actually have to separate this into these into a little bit more complicated parts, all right? So I always like to think as like there's the 2 mountains and then the valley, all right? This valley part, I'm actually going to do the valley part first. Out of those 18 groups, there is a section of them that are called Group B elements. Group B. All right, that's these ones right here. All right, those are numbers 3 through 12. All right, they are also known as the transition metals. These metals are, these include ones that you're very familiar with: gold, silver, copper, zinc, nickel, lead, or sorry, not lead, sorry, lead's right by the end of it there. But a lot of ones that you're very, very familiar with, we are in physical science, we are not going to focus on group B elements that much. All right, their chemistry is a little bit more complicated. Think about it, these ones are a little bit more complicated. We need to understand some more basic chemistry, which we'll do in this class, before we can approach group B elements. And chemistry absolutely will, but we're learning kind of the very basics of it so that you can eventually learn those ones. The ones we're going to be focusing on are the mountains, all right? The 2 different sides of the periodic table. These are group A elements, creative names they gave them. Group A. Group A, all right? These are called the Group A elements. That's number 1 and 2. and then number 13 through 18. Oh, yeah. These are also known as the representative elements because they represent a wide range of properties. Which means we actually are going to relabel some of these groups because we can label these as both group A and group B. I said we're not going to really focus on the group B, so I'm only going to actually relabel these, the group A elements. Group 1 is actually also known, because it is a group A element, it is also known as 1A. Group 2, it being the second A group, is called 2A. Now we skip the valley because those are group Bs. 13, it's not 13A, it's not the 13th group A, it's the third group A. So it's 3A, and 4A, 5A, 6A, 7A, get a little squished on my numbers here, and then finally group 8A. All right, now some of these ones, they have even more specific names. For example, group 1A, because all of these elements in group 1A, this one right here, they are metals. They're extremely reactive. They're typically pretty malleable, which means you can almost cut a lot of these metals with just a knife. You can cut metal with a knife very easily, almost like Play-Doh. These are also called the alkali metals. And we'll label all of these in a little bit on your periodic tables later on. Group 2A is known as the alkaline earth. One that's very, very specific is 7A. Those are known as the halogens. If you've ever seen a halogen light bulb, that's one that's filled with that gas that's inside there. And then there's 8A, which are known as the noble gases. All right, eventually we will color code our periodic tables that I'm going to give you guys in class. We're not quite there yet. So, okay, so what are we recapping right here? All right, things we need to know. All right, periods go this way. There are 7 of them. Groups go up and down. There's 18 of them. And those 18 are broken into Group A and Group B. Group B we're not going to focus so much on. Their chemistry is a little bit more advanced than we're going to be going in here. Group A, the representative elements include things like alkali metals, alkaline earth, halogen, and noble gases. All of this is just the idea of being able to read our periodic table. So if I take you back over here, back to our periodic table, and I asked the question earlier, what element is in period 3, group 16? You should be able to do that now. Period 3, that's the third row. You go over to group 16. Sulfur, S for sulfur. All right. If I wanted to say what element is in period 4, group 3A, take a second. Period 4, group 3A, period 4, that's the fourth row, group 3A, it's Ga or gallium. Or the element in period 1, group 8A, would be 1. 8A is, helium. All right, so now we can learn all about these ones here about group 8A, about the periods and groups. I should be able to give you a group and a period, and you should be able to tell me which element that is. All right, I don't expect you to memorize every single element or name, but you can give me at least the letters. All right, that is your goal by the end of this video. If you do not feel comfortable doing that, go back and learn about which one's group and period, and we'll practice more of that going forward. All right. Otherwise, this video is getting kind of long, so I'm going to stop right here. Think about if you understand the difference between groups and periods. If you don't, go back and watch it again. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Good luck, and may the science be with you. Go Browns.